Hello, everybody. Today we will be talking about what demographics and different populations have on the American electorate because it's important to understand the plethora of different people that participate in our elections. I just wanted to create this video to talk about what different electoral maps would look like if only certain groups or populations of people had voted. So, first, let's take a look at what the map if only people of color had voted. As you can see, every single state and every single district and many counties would all go to the Democrats. It's important to understand why people of marginalized groups and populations side with the Democrats because fundamentally the Democratic Party is one of social services and using governmental intervention within the economy and different governmental resources to create a social safety net, which unfortunately applies to many people of color and different groups. The one reason and one thing that I thought was special about this map is that this map doesn't change no matter what ethnic group you pick. And so if you picked Asian Americans, this map would be entirely the same. Or if you picked indigenous people, this map would look entirely the same. So no matter what group or different ethnicity or different race you pick, the result is the same. Every single state turns Democratic, and it's important to understand that these things when we say, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, when we say that the marginalized populations and groups tend to side with the Democrats, that isn't absolute, and it's important to understand when we take a look at this map. So this map is the map if only white people voted. As you could see, the Republicans would have 369 electoral votes. It would be an electoral landslide if the Republicans, if this scenario were to occur. But I think that one thing that is important to understand is that the states of Iowa and Wisconsin both side with the Democrats. And so when we say these things such as marginalized populations and people of color tend to side with the Democrats, those things aren't absolute, and it doesn't work the other way as well. And so when we say white people tend to side with the Republicans, those things aren't absolute. And it's important to understand because Wisconsin is it is a swing state now, but Iowa is traditionally it has been a swing state, but in recent political history, it's sided with the Republican Party, and it shows how Republican candidates need the vote of marginalized groups and people of color to still win elections. And maybe if they didn't, it would result in a different scenario in which Democrats could win. And so it's important to understand what combination of votes and groups is what leads to current political victories in states. There aren't too many surprises when it comes to the states of California, Oregon, or Washington, specifically because those states are on the West Coast where things are a lot more progressive, and progressive people win elections on the West Coast, and which is the same thing that applies to the Northeast, where we see that the states of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and DC, the District of Columbia, all side with the Democrats because those states are traditionally, they may have a lot of white people or not, but those white people still side with the Democrats. And so it's important to understand the outliers in these cases where we would think where states of such as Iowa or Wisconsin would go with the Republican Party if only white people had voted. The reality is that that isn't true. The next map we're going to look at is if only women voted. So this election would be a landslide party. The Democratic Party would receive 461 electoral votes to the Republican Party's 71 electoral votes. And one thing that I wanted to point out on this map is that Nebraska's 2nd district is a Republican district. And that is something that is an outlier. It's quite odd because when we see Nebraska's 2nd district, it traditionally goes to the Democratic Party. Trump won it in 2016, yes, but it shows how women in Nebraska's 2nd district tend to side with the Republican Party. Maybe that's because of a higher concentration of white people or not, but since it is a city, the 2nd district encompasses most of a major city, that is an outlier, and it's important to understand as well. Some other things that we see on this map is that traditionally Republican states stay Republican. Utah, which is one of the most Republican states in the country, stays Republican, and so do most of the safe states that are going to the Republican Party in a traditional election year. The states such as West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah all remain with the Republican Party, which is something that wasn't super surprising, considering that those states are some of the most Republican states in the nation. One thing that was weird was that the District of Columbia actually went to the Republicans. And the last map that we're going to take a look at here is the map if only men voted. This election would probably be a landslide election where the Republican Party received 350 electoral votes to the Democratic Party's 158. And this map is kind of what we expected. The only true outlier here could be the state of New Hampshire, but that isn't surprising as well. Everything that we expected sort of showed up here, whereas men tend to side with the Republican Party, and only traditionally in the most, progressive states in the country did the Democratic Party win. Specifically, the states of Illinois, New York, California, Oregon, Washington. Those are all very progressive states, even though they have higher populations of white people. So when people say, oh, white people tend to side with the Republican Party, or when men tend to side with the Republican Party, it's important to note that those things aren't absolute. But some things that I sort of wanted to talk about overall was the idea that people of color, and if we look back at this first map, if I'm the Republican Party, I'm alarmed at this map, right? The Republican Party, and considering that America's population, Asian American population, is growing rapidly, and it's becoming the most rapidly growing population in America. And many other marginalized groups and people of color and ethnicities are becoming more prevalent in America. And so if I'm the Republican Party, this map is alarming to me. And it's the map of the only women voting is also an alarming map. This map right here. This is also an alarming map. This is something that the Republican Party is going to have to deal with in the near future, because, regardless of whether you choose to believe it or not, America is becoming less white, and it's becoming more other populations. And so the Republican Party is going to find it to be a lot harder to win elections when a lot of their base just takes up less percentage of the total national population. And so these are just a couple of maps that I just wanted to share with everybody and sort of explain how different populations, how different groups vote. And it's important to understand a couple of things, especially about different people of color and ethnicities and different races, is that a lot of these people tend to side with the Democratic Party because of financial decisions. It's not because of specific political ideologies, but because of financial decisions, where people that just are more financially strained tend to side with the party that provides more benefits compared to the Republican Party, and that's a question of ideologies. And so I just wanted to bring about this video to sort of briefly explain what different political shifts and ideologies look like and how that affects the American electorate.